Hi everybody, I want to show you how to take some cheap and nasty items and turn them into high-end home decor. Welcome to my crafting channel. I'm Alana from Upcycling NZ. We're going to start with this bamboo bowl. It's pretty light. It took me a while to decide what to do with this because a lot of mediums will not adhere very well to bamboo. So we're going to decoupage this with music paper. I'm going to use wood PVA glue for this. It sets a bit harder than normal PVA and will give it a nice durable surface. When you're decoupaging with thicker paper like this, it pays to rip it often, especially around the curves, and rip it up smaller if you need to in order to make sure it follows the curve of your surface you're working on. My mum was getting rid of this bowl, so she gave it to me to craft with, along with a lot of stuff. She's a ex-kindergarten teacher, so she's always got craft resources at home. So I've covered the inside and the sides and overlapped the bottom there because I'm going to put some felt as a base underneath it. I'm just drawing around a bread plate, which is the size I want, and cutting that out. Then I'll glue that to the bottom of the bowl, which will give it some weight and add to its high-end finish. I'll use a lot of glue to go under the felt because the felt tends to soak up a lot of the glue. And I'm going to flatten that out using a plastic palette knife to push all of the bubbles out. And to finish this, I'm just going to use my stamp pad and rub that all the way around that outer edge. Smooth that over with my finger. And it just gives a little bit of contrast. It's barely noticeable. And I'll do the same around using a paintbrush around the inside rim. And again, just smooth that out with my finger. I love that, gives it more dimension. So I'll just do that around the outside very lightly, and that one's done. I'll show you how that looks at the end of the video. For inside the bowl, I've got a plastic chew toy which is quite hard, some plastic balls from a child's playpen. I'll use tins to hold those while I paint, and these are some Christmas ornaments. I've also got some black chalk paint and some white chalk paint, and I'll paint them in either of those depending on what I think I'll put on the surface of each. Nip the tips off those Christmas ornaments. You don't need to fill that hole. You'll see why soon. Taking some twine, and I'm going to run a piece down each of the grooves all the way around the chew toy. I paid a couple of dollars for the chew toy and the plastic balls, and I had the ornaments left over from another project. I'm going to follow the circle at the top with twine as well. I'll start off with some hot glue for the first time around. Be very careful to use as little hot glue as possible. Then I'm going to change to PVA glue so that the hot glue doesn't build up and get lumpy underneath the twine. And I'm going around about 3 times, tucking the end under and just securing it with a dab of hot glue. I've done both sides, and I've run some twine around the centre. I'm going to burn off the loose fibres that come from twine. And that one's done. I'm using twine again for that little Christmas ornament, and I'm just going to make a swirl between my fingers just as a base to start off with hot glue there. And I'll change to PVA glue to wind that twine on all the way. The twine covered the little hole that existed from cutting the end off. Once you reach halfway, it gets a bit tricky to wind on, so I'm mixing hot glue and PVA and just winding that very last piece nice and tidy with a bit of hot glue. I found with these little plastic balls that if I used too much hot glue, it started to melt the plastic, so I had to keep cooling my gun down. I'm using rope for this one, and it was a lot faster and a lot more enjoyable to make. So if you're impatient like me, stick with the heavier mediums. I love how this one turned out. I also made some with some red twine. I made a couple with this very heavy wool, and I made one with a black rope. The next project is one of these wooden letters. It's a letter G. I got it for 50 cents at a charity shop, and I'll just give it a light sand, and I'm going to paint all of the sides and the back in a black chalk paint. Just give it one coat at this stage. So talking about my mum and all of the crafting supplies she had in her home, it's no doubt that I ended up being craft mad. I'm using music paper again for this, but I'm going to stencil it with some black chalk paint using a damp sponge. I'm going to go dark in some areas, and then I'm going to feather that out along with a bit of water spritzed on that sponge, and fill in all of the other areas with a slightly lighter coating. I think that turned out amazing. So I'll centre the G on there and draw around it so that I don't have to sand off too much when I come to sand the edges. I'm cutting that close to that line, and I'm going to PVA glue that onto the G. You can use Mod Podge. Just ensure that when you are brushing that on, you get all the way around the edges so the paper doesn't lift from the edge. I'm going to flatten that down with a paper towel, and I'm really pressing around those edges to make sure that it's not going to lift. I'm not going to glue the top of this at this stage. I'll allow that to dry, and then I'm just going to sand off any excess all the way around. When you're sanding, make sure you sand towards the back of the piece, and then it won't lift. Wipe it off. Then I'm going to do a second coat of black chalk paint, and when that was dry enough, I added another coat of PVA glue to the surface of that paper. The glue will seal it, but I just want it to be able to be dusted easily, so I'm going to put a clear coat on, and when that's been on for about 15 minutes, I buffed it off again. First with a soft rag, and then I used a paper towel to ensure I didn't have any goopy stuff left on it. And that's it for this one. Next thing I've got is a rather flimsy wicker basket. Don't particularly like the colour, so I'm going to put 2 coats of white chalk paint around at the edges, the bottom and the sides. And I'm going to wind twine all the way around both of those handles, which is going to strengthen this basket up quite a lot. Tuck that end in. I'm going to cover this with some beautiful fabric with some roses, and I'm just cutting out slightly bigger than I'm going to need by going around the outside of the bottom. Trim that out, and then you can size it up better inside the basket itself. Turn it over so that I can draw around the edge that I want to trim it to. I'll use a sponge to glue that down, and I'm using the PVA wood glue again. Just think it's going to get a lot better coverage and get down into those grooves a bit better. This will also strengthen this basket up. I'm using a dry sponge to just pat that down and make sure it's adhering into the grooves. I'm taking some more of the rope that I used earlier hot gluing that all around to cover up that rough edge. This basket was another op shop find. I can't remember what it cost, but I know I wouldn't have paid more than $1 or $2 for something like this. I'm trimming that last end and tucking it away tidy. I think for all of these projects I would have completed the materials included for under $10. Let's see at the end how much value for that $10 we get. I'm just putting a final coat over the top of the fabric, and when that's dry I'm just taking what was left on my clear wax brush and I'm just going to brush that on. I don't want too much wax on this because I think it will attract dust. Thanks so much for sticking with me and really appreciate you watching. And here's the final reveal. I'm loving how these turned out, and I love the pop of colour. It gives it such warmth. That fabric's just gorgeous on that cane basket as well. If you're new to my channel, I love to show you where I live and some of the beauty of New Zealand in my videos. This is a beautiful sunset overlooking the Pelorus Sound, which is near Havelock in the South Island of New Zealand. I'll just let you soak that in for a minute. Something to be said about beautiful views and how good it is for your soul.